Okay, so we're going to be starting another lesson today on 3.4, which is proving that two lines are parallel based on the information given. So I just want to quickly go over again some of these special angle pair relationships that we talked about in the earlier sections. So this would normally be a do now, but we're going to go over this quickly before starting the notes just to do a little refresher. So for the first statement here, we have angles 2 and what are corresponding angles. Again, remember, for a corresponding angle, if I were to take my paper and I were to cut it and slide it down, corresponding angles would be the ones that overlap. So in this case, angle 2 and angle 6 would be corresponding angles. For the next one, consecutive interior angles. Again, remember, in between the two lines are my interior angles, and consecutive meaning one after another, I should say. So angle 3 and angle 5 would be my consecutive interior angles. For number 3, alternate interior angles, also still in the interior but on opposite sides of the transversal. So in this case, angle 3 and angle 6 would be alternate interior angles. And for the last one, alternate exterior angles, again, exterior being on the outside of those two transversals. The two lines, and alternate being on opposite sides of the transversals. So angle 2 and angle 7 will be alternate exterior angles. Okay. Now, we learned in this next lesson about lines cut by a transversal that if those lines are parallel, which we can tell they're parallel because we have our little arrows which indicate that the two lines are parallel, then we learned that all pairs of angle relationships are congruent except for consecutive interior, which are supplementary. So in order to use that for number 6, I can see that 2x and 138 are alternate interior angles. Therefore, because they would be congruent, I can set their measures equal. Okay? And then I would divide by 2 on both sides, and I would get x equals 69 degrees. Number 7, these would be alternate exterior angles. So again, my angles would be congruent, which means I can set their measures equal. And when I subtract 1 from each side, I get 150 equals 2x. Therefore, x would equal 75 degrees. Lastly, for number 8, this would be a pair of consecutive interior angles. Therefore, they are going to be supplementary. So I can set up the equation 7x plus 15 plus 81 equals 180. When I combine like terms, I get 7x plus, we have 96 equals 180. Okay, so 7x is going to equal 84. And when I divide by 7 on both sides, I'm going to get x equals 12. Okay? So again, just a brief reminder of how to use our parallel lines cut by a transversal. Now, we're going to use that information to prove lines are parallel. So as we've talked about in previous chapters, we have our conditional statement, which you guys took down last week on our foldables, and then we have the converse statements. So in our conditional statement about corresponding angles, we said if two parallel lines are cut by a transversal, then their corresponding angles are congruent. So now we have the converse of that, which says if two lines are cut by a transversal so that corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are parallel. So in the previous sections, we were assuming that the lines are parallel and could infer from that that the corresponding angles are congruent. Now we're saying the reverse is also true. If those corresponding angles are congruent, then I can assume the lines are parallel. This is also going to be true for my alternate interior angles. So again, instead of saying if the lines are parallel, then I can assume that alternate interior angles are congruent, I'm saying the converse of that. If the angles are congruent, I can assume that the lines are parallel. Consecutive interior angles, we know consecutive interior angles are supplementary. If the lines are parallel, we're now saying the converse. If the consecutive interior angles are supplementary, we can assume that those two lines are parallel. And lastly, for alternate exterior angles, if the alternate exterior angles are congruent, we can assume that the lines are parallel. Okay. We have a quick little proof here. So for our proof, we always know the first statement's given, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Next, we have angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. If we look at our picture up here, again, remember when doing proofs, we want to talk about how did I know this information was true? What definition or what postulate or what theorem did I have to know in order to make this assumption that this is true? So for this one, we are told that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. If we look at the relationship by angle 2 and angle 3, we can see that these are vertical angles. Therefore, I can say that this is a true statement because of the vertical angle theorem. Next, we're going to use our property. So if we look at statements 1 and 2, in statement 1, I have angle 1 is congruent to angle 2. Then I have angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. Therefore, I can assume angle 1 is congruent to angle 3 will be my transitive property. And lastly, if angle 1 is congruent to angle 3, using what we just learned, okay, angle 1 and angle 3, we can tell our corresponding angles. So this would be the corresponding angle converse. Okay. The other type of problem we can have here is we can be asked which values would make it so that the lines are parallel. Meaning, if, for in this case, we're looking at consecutive interior angles, we know that consecutive interior angles, if they are supplementary, would make these lines J and K parallel. So the question is asking me, find the value of X that makes J parallel to K. So we know when I'm talking about consecutive interior angles, if I'm looking to make X and 4X supplementary, then I can say that these lines would be parallel. So X plus 4X equals 180, because we know supplementary means adds up to 180. I can combine like terms to get 5X equals 180, and lastly solve by dividing by 5 to get X equals 36. Okay, so if X equals 36, then J and K will be parallel because the interior angles will be supplementary. Looking at these last few practice problems, okay, we want to know, can you prove that these lines are parallel? And if so, why or why not? So, for number 3, we're going to skip 1 and 2. We already know what parallel lines are, and we're not going to worry about the converse of 3.8. So if we look at number 3, we have a pair of alternate exterior angles. So we're being shown that these alternate exterior angles are congruent, and the converse, the alternate exterior angle converse, says that if alternate exterior angles are congruent, then we can assume that lines P and Q are parallel. Number 4, we're given the pair of vertical angles. We do not have any theorem that states anything about parallel lines and vertical angles. For this, we do not have enough information to prove that they would be parallel. Okay, if we look at angle 5, we have an angle up here and down here. There is no relationship between these angles to say that they are vertical, to say that they are alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding, none of that. Okay, so I can't assume from this that these are parallel lines. 6, we have a pair of alternate interior angles, 62 and 62, which means they're both congruent. So this would be the alternate interior angle converse. 7, we have 105 up here, 105 down here. These are corresponding angles. We're shown that they are congruent, so this would be the corresponding angle converse. Okay. Number 8, we have a pair of consecutive interior angles. So we have to first determine, are they supplementary? So first we're going to add 123 and 57. And we see that they are supplementary. So this would be the consecutive interior angle converse, which tells me that because they are supplementary, those two lines must be parallel. Lastly, for number 9, it says find the value of x that makes these two lines parallel. Okay, again, these are both consecutive interior angles, so I'd have to show that they are equal to 180. And again, I get 36 to make this true. Okay, and that's all we're going to do with the converse statements here. And just make sure you review if you have any questions and mark down your questions on your paper so we can go over them in class.